If you'll indulge me, I'd like to take a shot at answering a question here, because it seems that inevitably at events of this nature, the question is asked at the end, so what do we do? And I've heard, and I'll try to answer Jake's question. I could whisper it, but I think there are other people in the room who are yearning for a somewhat more complete answer to that question, other than the survivalism tactic and saying we're going to go all hide in the woods and take care of ourselves and wait for the dust to settle and then maybe crawl back out, because frankly I think that's kind of the coward's answer. I understand the need for developing self-sustainability and being able to take care of yourself when food supplies and water supplies run short and so on and so forth, but our founders would be ashamed if that was the best answer we could come up with to the fascism that we're facing today, in light of the way that they faced the fascism that they were facing. And compared to what they were facing, what we're facing is much more totalitarian, much more insidious, and much more dangerous to our daily way of life than anything the founders faced. But they would be ashamed if they heard that we couldn't come up with anything better. And if I may use the example of Iraq Veterans Against the War and the way that we are tackling the problem of the occupation of Iraq, I'm a subscriber to Gene Sharp's consent theory of power, and that is that all power structures are inherently unstable and exist only with the consent and support of those governed by them. And so what we are doing to end the war in Iraq is not speaking out about it. We're not holding rallies or protests or marching or any of that crap. We're not holding signs or waving banners. We're building a GI resistance movement. We are withdrawing the military support for the occupation of Iraq by doing counter-recruiting, specifically truth in recruiting, which is our pro-military, pro-reform approach to that. We are supporting GI resistance, and we're helping veterans get out of the service. Now, if you can just think for a second outside of the cage and ask yourself, how can that same strategy be applied to the broader problem of fascism? How can we withdraw our consent and support for the government that is oppressing us today? And it's really not that hard, if you think about it. I've noticed something in the Ron Paul movement that doesn't get talked about often enough. But I haven't met a lot of IRS agents that are big fans of Ron Paul. You know, I haven't met a lot of really people who go out of their way to pay any extra taxes in the Ron Paul movement. I haven't met anybody who is really enthusiastic about government jobs. In fact, I've heard people leaving their jobs to become full-time activists, and there's a lot of applause for becoming a full-time activist. But people miss the crux of that, which is that they quit their government job. And let me just say, if you work for the government and you cannot justify theft from the American people to pay your salary, you have a moral obligation to quit your job, especially if you work for the IRS. If you pay taxes, if you pay the federal income tax, and you realize that you are funding torture, unjust warfare, domestic surveillance, unconstitutional government, you have a moral obligation to stop paying federal income taxes. So I'd like to tell you for a second about a project that we've been working on called Slave Uprising, slaveuprising.com. And of course, the pitch always ends with a website, right? But 2,000 years ago, a Roman senator said we should make all of the slaves in Rome wear a white armband so that they can be easily identified. And another wiser senator said, no, if they see how many of them there are, they may revolt. And so nobody asked, but this is not a fashion statement I'm making here. This is an affirmation of my commitment to resisting the federal income tax. I have not paid in a year and a half. And I would just like to ask you all, when you hear about all of this and you see the problem of fascism that we're facing in this country, and you know that we've been punched in the face, that you don't stop and pore over every photograph of the bully's hand and try to figure out the meanings of the symbols of the imprint in your forehead, to use an analogy, trying to live up to all the beautiful ones that Dave used earlier. But seriously, I love the fact that there are people doing this, that there are people who are seeking the truth. But it doesn't matter how much you pore over the photographs of what happened at the World Trade Center. If you're not willing to think, why am I doing this? What are the principles that I believe in? What is it that makes me American? What does it makes me proud to be an American? What are the values and the principles that our founders set forth for us as standards to live up to? And are we living up to those? And are we doing it in our own life? In what ways in our own life are we supporting and consenting to the fascism that we're experiencing? And in what ways can we stop and educate others and inspire other people to do the same thing and live up to their principles? Thanks.
Good deal, man. Wow.